Welcome novices and acolytes to the Sisterhood, presented by DuneNewsNet.com and What the Force. Join us on this meta-mythic journey through the Dune universe.
Welcome novices to the Sisterhood. I'm Hannah, your host, and with me today is my co-host Marie Claire from What the Force.
Hello.
You can follow us at Podcast Above All across social media. You can follow me at Shia Spring on Twitter and Blue Sky. And where can people find you, MC?
I'm available at Marie C. Gould on most platforms, and I'm most well known for my Star Wars podcast, What the Force, if you want to listen to all of this sort of thing about Star Wars.
And we're going to start with some opening questions from Winters on the What the Force Discord. With what is going on in the Sisterhood, do you feel that there will end up being a schism? And if so, which side will win out?
Within the Sisterhood.
I feel like this makes sense that this is a question because division within the Sisterhood is it's been a theme throughout the season and like a topic that's been brought up. But I think the answer is really clear to me anyway, that I think Valya's side's going to win if there is any kind of real divide, just because we know where the Sisterhood ends up. Like, the breeding program stuff is successful.
Yeah.
Like, they do that for
a really long time.
Yeah. And it does make sense that there might be a little bit more of that conflict that they'll milk, but I actually don't know if there'd be a full schism.
I think there might be a schism between sisters. That's truthfully what I think is going to happen between Tula and Valya over Desmond Hart. And
yeah.
This all comes into my theory that Valya was the one who convinced Tula to abandon Desmond.
Yeah, I think so too. The thing about that is it changes then what is the point of the schism?
Yeah.
Because it's setting you up to think that there's going to be this anti-technology versus, yes, anti-technology, but in this one instance, we'll use AI.
Yeah.
For the breeding and stuff. And that's going to be that dividing point.
Instead, it's more character-driven.
In that sense, it almost makes me think Tula might win.
Yeah, and so I have a lot of theories based on archetypes on that. Because Tula is the upcoming queen within the Sisterhood, Valya potentially has to hand the reins over to her, archetype-wise. Valya has to be sacrificed so that the Sisterhood can continue, and Valya will need to use Desmond's genetics to continue on their mission.
Yeah, and I remember there was an interview, I think it was for Comic-Con, but the actresses, Emily and Olivia, they were talking about how when they were preparing for the roles, they went to a museum and they were looking at portraits of Elizabeth I and Mary Queen of Scots.
Oh, okay.
Thinking about this dynamic and stuff, and the idea of being sisters and not wanting to be opposed to each other, but being forced to be opposed to each other. And I don't know who would be considered Mary and who would be Elizabeth here.
Oh, that would be Mary is Valya.
If that's what we're thinking, that does make the most sense.
Is the one to take the Sisterhood into the next phase of this.
And it also makes sense in the way that because you see Francesca's reaction to, what does Tula think?
Yeah.
Valya's, she supports Leah as
She's
always.
totally on my side. So that to me says that Valya's been making decisions for a really long time, which we've seen in some of the flashbacks that Tula has just gone along with.
Then at the same time, I think that maybe Tula's also just been garnering more support on an emotional level and trust on an emotional level as Valya's removed herself, as she's ascended to becoming the Mother Superior. In a way, even when Kasha returned, Tula was there listening to her and supporting her and stuff like that. And then even though in the flashbacks, Kasha and Francesca are Valya's besties, but then in a modern time, Tula's the one who's hyper emotional over Kasha's passing. And so I think there was they still were on Valya's side and believed in her and stuff, obviously. But I do think if there were to be a shift, I think Francesca would back Tula is what I'm thinking. Yeah. So answering that question, yes, I think we think that there will be a schism, but not the schism based on what we've seen in the past. Another thing that I want to point out is I did not expect Jen to have no reaction to anything
Oh,
in the secret vault other than Lila. And even then she was like, okay.
all right.
I was
This is what we're
expecting
doing.
I was expecting Jen to be so much more anti all of this than she actually turned out being, which I think is really interesting. Our next question is from Akatero on YouTube. I've been listening to all 4 episodes, and I'm curious where these archetypes you use to analyze the characters in the series come from. This is the first time I've heard them. Great work and best regards. Thank you so much. And yeah, MC.
Yeah, the origin, at least from all of them, is that they're ever present in our lives as part of life stages that we go through. And they were first named in this way or collected in a book with Joseph Campbell and A Hero with a Thousand Faces, which you may or may not have talked about. He famously talks about the hero's journey, but he also talks about how different phases of life will continue to go on the journey, including the king going on his journey and how that's different from the mage, and he named them a particular way. Since then, other authors and writers have taken his work and transformed it, like the heroine's journey, who Maureen Murdoch, she talks about the hero's journey, but more from a feminine lens, using feminine symbolism and different um a lens to wholeness for women. She, in there, takes the different phases of life and uses the terminology like goddess and crone and heroine and maiden and things like that. There's also an author called Kim Hudson who specifically looks at the maiden phase of life. So the first journey of the women, oftentimes that maiden phase where you're struggling with just cusping into adulthood. It's one of the most favorite stories of Hollywood is young people out on adventures. And then there's, of course, Women Who Run with the Wolves, who is done by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. They all talk about these different life phases more from a feminine lens. And sometimes you'll hear the term maiden, mother, crone, especially if you watched Agatha all along. Maiden, mother, crone, that is part of this whole construct. So you're a hero, you're a king, you're a mage, you're a maiden, you're a mother, you're a crone, mother being renamed queen in this circumstance. And then there's a great author who is called K.M. Wayland, and she actually consolidated all of these different sources into a way to think about them as they are applied to story. And so she actually references the sources that I talk about all the time. And I agree with her 95% of the time with how she's interpreted them. And it's a really easy way to get into talking about the archetypes. I like her terminology for them. She talks about how the life archetypes, as you go through the first phase, you're first in maiden and hero. And these are active, positive change archetypes. Then you move into your second phase of life, sort of parentalhood or family or community. So, queen, king, protecting the larger kingdom when you're a king. And then you move into your final third phase of life, crone, mage, where you're trying to figure out how to both still be relevant to protect young heroes, younger generation growing up, but also to make an impact on the world that will permanently change how the world works. When you're in each of these phases, they also have 2 shadow archetypes that are associated with sort of stagnation and not moving. These are talked about in all sorts of different sources and have just been consolidated again by K.M. Wayland in a way that I really like. So the interpretation that we sometimes show on the screen is from her work. These shadow archetypes are either aggressive, so vixen, bully, sorceress, tyrant, wicked witch, sorcerer, or they're passive. So they're trapped in not wanting to do things. So damsel, coward, snow queen, puppet, hermit, miser. We talk a lot about how Havoko hasn't actually been acting like a king at all because he primarily lets other people make decisions. And you actually see those people step into the light or they're standing behind him whispering, or they're taking power from him to act in their own stead. Or he listens to whoever currently is in his vision. And that's a king that is also causing a stagnation in the kingdom, which is part of the sort of a threat to the kingdom itself. If the king is sick, if the king is a puppet, then the kingdom itself is not well. And so these archetypes have their own arcs, they have their own relationship with their shadow version, they have a meaning behind them that helps us both interpret sort of a layer of the story beyond just what is being said on screen. It helps us understand sort of some of the more psychological layers because much of this is tied to Jungian psychology and those archetypes, as well as being able to talk about what the story is saying, even on a layer underneath in a more subconscious, unconscious uh, way. It's cool. It's all symbolic. And everybody goes through life archetypes. So the more you learn about them, the more you can recognize where you are in your own life.
Yeah, I recognize it in my own life and across all of the media that I consume now. There are,
Flat archetypes where there is no movement, like being a parent,
Mhm.
being a ruler, etc. And Cam talks about those as well. And those have been covered by Joseph Campbell and tons of other writers, like the famous Mage Warrior King book, The Four Primary Male Archetypes. Child is also an archetype. It's just flat because you're a child and you're protected by others. And then you go into being a maiden. And then you go into being potentially a hero or a lover, right? There's lots of little, I'm just stable right now. I'm not actually changing. I'm not transforming. Part of the archetypes is that you're in an active journey to transform into something else.
And we've talked a little bit about Pruitt as the child a little bit, and then
Mhm.
Kieran as the lover initially. And
Yeah.
so we've definitely gone into a lot of archetype stuff in our first few episodes. So of course, go back and take a look, refresh yourself. Yeah, and so we'll jump into discussing where our life archetypes are for this episode.
Yeah.
Starting with Lila. Yeah, we were talking about like her potentially being the queen just because of what it seemed like the trajectory with that underworld journey was going to end up looking like.
Yeah.
But not quite there yet.
No, I actually still think she's like in this heroine's journey or a feminine hero's journey where she's meeting with the dark goddess still and still going through a road of trials or a struggle to understand who she is amongst all of this sort of ancestor noise. And so, yeah, I still think she's in this hero phase, especially with what we're seeing on screen. Yeah.
And she expresses like still moments of insecurity or
Yeah.
being entirely sure of herself. Like when she's talking to Jen, she's, oh, I hope I haven't let anyone down. So she's not completely like confident in herself and her own contribution and journey yet, which I think is that big indicator for sure that she hasn't taken on that role yet.
Exactly.
She's so cool in this episode, though. Oh
She
my
is.
gosh, I can't
Yeah.
wait. I can't wait to talk about her. And then
Kieran is a hero. I just want to say that because he's like out there fighting dragons. Like he's
Yeah.
trying to destroy the imperial power so that this place it's classic hero stuff. Like I'm going to go bring down the evil empire. Okay, Luke Skywalker. Like you can almost see it, but he waffles between being a coward and being a hero, but he ended the episode in a heroic fashion by confessing that he didn't feel like he had done anything that he wouldn't own up to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Francesca.
What do you think?
We're finally, oh my gosh. I'm absolutely in love with her already. I wish she was in more of the season. Like, I understand and I like the build up, but I need season 2 immediately because I need more Francesca.
It definitely feels like they're leaving a let out there that they could build on. So I don't see how they don't already have a season 2 planned, right? Um,
Like I can just see the big plans that they have for her. Oh,
mhm.
I'm so excited. She's definitely a queen. Her son is her main concern, for sure. Even with the other obligations, like you can tell, like genuinely, the main thing that she cares the most about is Constantine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She mentions it
she
like
just
4 times. Like, what is
yeah.
his I'm here
Mhm.
for him. And queens are all focused around the family and the sort of insular community around the family and what it means. The shadow archetypes are often sorceress and snow queen, which involve like building up air barriers to protect the family. That's not really her. She's quite balanced. She's negotiating and she's having heart to heart conversations with her son, and she's having heart to heart conversations with those she wants to be his mentor, his father. Like, it's quite balanced. I would say she's probably the most balanced character we've probably seen that's not like waffling one way or another in an extremely aggressive or passive way.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And she's like a very calm presence on screen too. Like even in moments where you can tell she's a lot more emotional or impassioned, she just has this
Hmm.
air of serenity around her, which is really refreshing, I think, compared to all the other characters. And it helps with her mystique in a way too.
Compared to Natalia, who looks like she's sucking lemons the whole episode.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
she's like this. Like, so like every time she's on
Oh,
screen, Natalia's having a moment. It's great.
yeah.
Constantine. We did say he moved into the heroes phase, but he immediately became a coward.
Yes.
And he is in the heroes phase almost because his parents have shoved him out
Hmm.
of this vixen door that he's been in. So a vixen is known for aggressively like proving authority right in a way. So vixens will either
Hmm.
be like, I'm going to go be an assassin or a femme fatale, or like our good boy Constantine, a F boy.
Hmm.
Like sleeping around in every chamber in the palace. Like his dad describes him this way. He knows what he is. He progresses into this hero phase, trying to help Inez, trying to take this step forward, but immediately is, I don't know how to do this. Takes on this hero step of finding out a villain in their mist. But then I suspect he'll probably overcompensate and go into the aggressive negative archetype of bully. That's just
Hmm.
my speculation because he's been so aggressive in his maiden phase that he will be aggressive in his hero phase. That's just my thoughts. Aggressively protecting
Yeah.
Inez, aggressively
Yeah.
protecting the throne, aggressive. It'll go overboard
I mean,
in him trying to prove things. Often parents are the threshold guardians for maidens going off onto a hero's journey, actually going out into the world. Maidens are kept at home, right? And so even I question whether Yanez is fully crossed into being a hero. She's cusping, right? But she still is letting her parents decide
mhm.
what is best for her. She's still trapped
Yeah.
in this like palace, right? Whereas Constantine is being shoved out the door by both of his parents.
But here.
Get out of here. Go be a
Yeah.
hero.
Yeah. But for sure,
The adage that sometimes heroes have glory thrust upon them. It's like that. And we see Desmond trying to take Kieran under his wing halfway through the episode, and I just wonder if Desmond's just gonna take Constantine instead.
Mhm.
So we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see potential there, especially because if Constantine ends up going through some stuff on Arrakis,
Mhm.
Desmond might be the only person who can relate to him in that way.
Yeah.
And that might be like a natural kind of bond that develops, but we'll see where that would go theoretically in future seasons. But as of now, yeah, he's definitely teetering between coward and bully. And in terms of aggressive archetypes, Empress Natalia, our resident tyrant.
Yeah, she fully claimed it. So she's not only, like, taking over what the kingdom should do, but also taking a power piece away from Havoko, too. In a very
She
sexy, aggressive way.
Mm. I have thoughts about that, but I will get to them. But it definitely feels, and this episode reiterated it in a way that I thought was very important because I was aware of the fact that her backstory is important to her, but this made it really clear that she resents the power that she used to have being taken away from her, like the power she had before she married Habakkuk.
Hmm.
I don't know what the political situation was there, but her marrying Habakkuk brought thousands of worlds into the Imperium, and that only happened because they got married.
Yeah.
And she brokered that union. Like, she had a lot of power
Yeah. But
before,
now
and now
she
she
is
has
like none.
none. And so it feels, part of me is, I don't even think she's necessarily heartbroken over Habakkuk.
Hmm.
She's just pissed off that another woman has the power over him that she should have had, or she would have ideally had.
That's my puppet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's a very interesting character, but also at the same time, getting a little bit one note for me.
Yeah.
I want to see either big downfall for the tyrant sort of scenario, or I want to see a lot more internal stuff going on for Natalia beyond just I'm butthurt about everything.
Yeah.
So feels like where she's at.
Mhm.
Maybe the stuff with Desmond could open that up.
I'll have to think about it, but the tyrant usually has to realize that they have to move aside for the next generation. Like the king
Yeah.
has to move aside for the next generation to rule and lead, etc.
But Havako, once again, is a puppet.
He is a puppet. I thought so they did a big play at the beginning of this. We have Francesca return. We have Desmond. We'll dig into this because it's right away that I thought they were playing with us, but no. So Francesca returns. She walks off the cool ship. It's really cool.
Mhm.
And then we had flash to Desmond getting prepped, putting away his knife, putting away this cloth that he carries with him, which
Mm.
I felt was very Moses, and that'll become significant as we learn about his background later on in the episode, but it means that he is a divine child. This idea that he is an orphan, he has been left to the reeds. That's a Moses-like motif, which means he is a divine child meant to come and change things. He is an agent of change. He is a harbinger of change, which we already knew because of
Had it playing.
we had prophecies, we had visions of blood. But what is actually happening is Havoko is having this moment where he's like giving these troops to Desmond so he doesn't have to use his powers directly, which is very thoughtful to root out the rebel plot and making him a Bashir, which is a cool title.
I think it has, I should have looked it up specifically, but I'm pretty sure it has Turkish origins. But Bashar is also the title of a Sardaukar, the Sardaukar forces.
Sudakar, that,
Like the
which is
initial,
like the Imperial Army specialty troops, right?
yes, but like before they're quite as imposing as they are later.
But
I'm
they
so
all look
curious
like they're
about
part
that.
of the Assassin's Creed video games.
They do. To be honest though, I'm not a huge fan of the outfit. They look a little bit too, I'd see them in a skater park or something, or breakdancing. Just a little bit. I don't hate it, but not my favorite.
They shopping at an anime store.
They look like you went shopping at an anime store. I'm hoping for an upgrade for season
The
2.
Sudakar are like wearing in the modern Dune.
It's white, but they have the blood of slaves on their helmet and their uniforms, but they're like more like bulky tactical gear, and then they got the helmets that are really cool. And the blood was very
Visceral.
definitely, yeah, very visceral. Not quite there yet, but I am curious because it clearly means that we're going to see that development of the Sardaukar in the future, which I'm also very interested in. And because the other thing is the Sardaukar are meant to be this ultra loyal to the Emperor force. For the Emperor, they will do the Emperor's will without question. And so I am curious about where that goes. And it makes sense that I think Desmond would be the Bashar that initially leads them. But yeah,
Sort of,
so this ceremony is going on, and when it's officially technically over,
there's so much
it's happening.
subtle acting that happens after Inez
Mhm.
storms off. We get like happy Natalia until Francesca shows up. We get this very loyal look, or like she flirts with him a little bit. She's it looks good on you, or something like that.
Oh my god. Okay, I will get that because I have thoughts. But one thing that I just want to call out because I love it so much is that as is, if my father ordered you to follow me, then you better keep up. And she just keeps going. And you can see all of the other nobles are like, they're not watching what's going on with Desmond. They're watching what's happening with Inez, which I felt really said a lot. It was so good. And then, yeah, there's that moment where Natalia thinks that everything's going her way. And she does subtly flirt with him. And then his response is, I was born to serve your grace. This is where I'm going to say my thoughts are. I don't think that an affair with Natalia actually aligns with Desmond's plans at all. I don't get the sense that he wants to reciprocate it with her at any point in the episode. He's not going to reject her in an abrupt way, but it doesn't actually align with what he like.
All he wants is to have power to be able to take about his actions. But
Mhm.
if their bullshit about the sisterhood aligns, he will go with it.
As of right now,
At this moment, no, he's not. I'm gonna have an affair with you, but
no. It's also like right in front of the emperor, but also I think that there's a genuine. The more that I think about it, and the more that I rewatch previous episodes, I do think that there's a genuine camaraderie between the Emperor and Desmond. Desmond's using him without question, but I also think that he has a genuine, I want you to be the Emperor, and I want you to thrive, and I want to serve you and be your loyal Bashar, and I want
Haviko
what's
was very
best for you.
kind to him, being like, I'm not gonna just use
Mhm.
you as a tool. I'm gonna give you tools to use to do this. So
Exactly.
yeah, I hear you. But then Francesca
That-
shows up and Natalia looks like she's gonna eat her fist. It's great.
And
Didn't
Haviko's
you know
like,
this was a private affair? Oh,
ooh,
so
it was
good.
so good.
It's
She
good.
starts out trying to be civil, but then there's like that bite at the end because she truly can't contain it. And then Francesca's not actually turned to look at her really at all. She's like addressing her, but not fully looking at her. But she's
Yeah.
actually, and then Haviko the entire time is just enchanted by her immediately, just like
I have never seen Mark
Francesca.
Strong look that in love.
I was giggling.
It's great. He looked like 20 years younger.
He did.
He
Oh my
looks
god,
like
it
a
was so good.
baby. He looks like, oh my God, my love of my life just won.
He's crying and he's writing her name in his journal. The little heart. Oh, so good. And then Francesca's just so calm and collected. And I'm not
Yeah.
here on sisterhood business. I'm here to see my son. And that's exactly what I said was going to be what was going to happen.
Yeah,
She
you
would
called it.
come under the pretense of Constantine. And that's why she's allowed to get her claws in there.
I thought Valya would be the reason, but this is better. This is just
Mhm.
like her being a concerned mother, which gives her a lot more
Yes.
agency than being directed by the Reverend Mother, which
Mhm.
shows these women are full realized characters with their own needs and wants and things like that, which I appreciate.
It also makes it clear that, like, the state of her relationship with Haviko too, like, she's
Mhm.
not approaching him with the intention of manipulating him for the sisterhood. She's approaching him with, like, we have a past, but we also have a son together.
Yeah.
It allows there to be, like, genuine tension there between them, which is
So
good.
I get the impression that they were probably together before the marriage contract with Natalia.
Yes. And I think that also makes sense because of the way that, like, Haviko talks about, like, when he was talking to Natalia, he was like, "You and I remember things differently." Because I think that
Mhm.
it was
He
probably a
probably
scenario.
regrets having to break things off, right?
Yeah, I am curious exactly what happened, but part of me wonders though if Haviko had to end things with Francesca because maybe that was like a part of the marriage deal, or if Francesca had to leave because she was like, the Sisterhood needs me to do stuff with the Spacing Guild, so I can't stay to be with you.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
I hope we
the
get
way
more. I hope we get more backstory and him reminiscing about the old days. That'll be great.
to be honest, I want full flashbacks of their
Who would have played Mark Strong as a young man?
I want to know who that person is.
He's got such a powerful presence, even as
Mhm.
a puppet. It is wild having him play a high status character with this puppet like persona. I've never seen him play a role like this. It is wild and quite
Yeah.
interesting, too.
Because you almost root for him to a certain point where you're like, please start doing stuff on your own and stop being a puppet. But then also him being a puppet almost makes you sympathize with him to a certain degree because he's just being used. But that doesn't take away from how he draws you in as a character.
Yeah. Let's move on to Constantine, who he's like trying to go and talk to Yanez about what's going on. And she's like shoving him away, all pissed at him. But what I find so fascinating is the first phase archetypes, which we already talked about, really this early phase maiden hero, are really driven by a desire to have purpose and understand one's own internalized power. And the hero arc leads you towards queen, i.e., wanting to build community, wanting to build family, wanting to build roots and connections. But fundamentally, when you're in a shadow archetype, cowards are ineffectual and bullies are destructive. So we see that with Desmond, right? Desmond's destruction is very clear. He literally sets people on fire. He goes out and destroys and beats up people in the smugglers area. But we haven't quite seen what's going on with Constantine other than he's unwilling to confront this lack of purpose that he has. And he's still very much under the thumb of what his father thinks of him, which you see all the time in story when you think about it.
Yeah. And because I'll say that this scene was so well acted and like props to Josh Houston because like you could tell like there was just like also like really nice subtle like movements in his face and his expression that like portray the depths of the conflict that he's feeling and the guilt like in that moment where he admits that like his dad was proud and like that was just so beautifully done. But the thing is he's also admitting all of this.
Yeah.
Like he's admitting that
Which is a brave thing for him to do, which is what heroes are all about, is becoming brave. But they really do need a purpose to drive them. So they need the quest. They need a quest to go and slay the dragon, to go and heal the sick king, etc.
So that's why I'm kind of like stuff is gonna go down for him on Arrakis.
It might go down even before he leaves for Arrakis, right? Just being given this responsibility. I just don't know if they're going to go to Arrakis in the final episode. There isn't a lot of time.
I feel like that would be all a season 2 plot for him.
Figuring out how much they can get done in a single episode.
There's so many characters, so there's definitely going to be stuff that's going to be left open just because there'd be no way of doing it justice. I feel like maybe they would leave him off in a place where he's either firmly a bully or firmly a hero. And then his arc would just progress from there. But yeah, I think it was a great first step, though, for him to be able to be so vulnerable and honest with Inez.
And it'll be interesting to see how his mother plays into his journey. If she's decided just to step back and give him space to be who he's going to be, will he come into conflict with the Sisterhood or will he protect what Inez wants? It'll be interesting.
And yeah, I am curious about that because it's also like that difference between Desmond and Constantine where like Desmond doesn't have a relationship with his mother and the fact that he doesn't have a relationship and feels somewhat abandoned or feels abandoned is why he has this hatred there. But then for Constantine, he does clearly love his mother and his mother loves him. And even though they've been apart for such a long time and he does hold some level of resentment, I don't think it's like to a destructive degree. And I think if Francesca's going to commit to being around him more, he'll love his mom, and his mom will be a nurturing presence and a good influence. And I think you can get that later in the episode with the dinner scene where she's holding on to him a little bit. It's very like cute little family moment. So I
Yeah.
think
Natalia's I'm fourth wheel here.
so next up, a sister Avila is running a class about pain resistance.
And I was
they
like,
have
wow,
this
it's like
flame.
proto box
Very
scenario.
much so. So I think you're right.
I think the virus
Um,
is triggered by some sort of fear. And so they
mhm.
have to master fear to be able to learn these higher level
Yeah.
sisterhood powers and Bene Gesserit
Mhm.
things. And so the box is a test to actually be like, should you actually know and be able to move towards like this vision? If you get close enough with all your powers, you'll get to this vision. And if you fear, you will combust into flame. I think everyone's going to have
Yeah.
the virus.
I think that's gonna be the reveal too. Because it's also in terms of Dune, the idea is that it's like a trap for an animal where an animal would just gnaw off their arm to get away.
Mhm.
But then a human would stick through it and figure out the answer and what the
Yeah.
cause of it all is. And so I think this is like a really powerful way of reiterating that message of what humanity's capable of. Because I think
Mhm.
Emmeline actually has like a banger line where the human mind is like the greatest weapon or
Yeah.
that. It was such a good line. I should have written it down, but very well reiterated, especially when Jen brings up the point about what protection do we have from nightmares.
Yeah, and if you
And
want us to discern you wanted to discern truth when none exists here. And I love how Tula's okay, you want truth? You're gonna get too much truth. But come with me. It's so good.
careful what you wish for.
Yeah. And so
Uh,
this is where we notice that she takes her down to the basement, the underworld. This is a symbolic motif of going into the unconscious, of course. And who do we see trapped there? But Lila in a prison cell, basically. Lila is in a death-like state. She is between life and death because she actually hasn't returned to the person that we knew, even transformed, although we can see her eyes
mhm.
are not normal. They're a mix of gold and blue, which is interesting. And I wanted to ask you, a lot of actors, even people who I didn't think should have blue eyes, seem to be wearing blue contacts. Is that to apply that there's a lot of spice in
I That is a good question. It's actually not something that I noticed, but maybe it's because I'm watching on my phone all the time.
maybe? I want to look at this if we end up doing the full pass through of all the episodes of season
Yeah.
in general, because her eyes look blue gold. It's like crazy
Uh,
contacts.
they're not like Michaela's. And like the thing is that when you undergo the spice agony to become a Reverend Mother, all of the Reverend Mothers are supposed to have the blue within blue eye.
Yeah.
And so does the Spacing Guild because of their spice
Mhm.
exposure. But they all wear these like full eye contact things that make their eyes
Yeah.
normal. But actually they have the blue within blue eyes. So I think it's a really cool detail and I'm glad that they included that. But it definitely feels like it's not quite the same.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's because it's supposed to be a slightly different poison than
Yeah.
the water of life, which is coming from the worm. But yeah, I am curious about that because people are doing spice everywhere in this show.
Yeah, all the time.
All of the time.
Everyone should have like, they should have a scene of somebody putting in those full contacts because
That
that
would
would be
be
cool.
good.
Because then we can just
Yeah,
assume everybody's got them.
exactly.
It's like the
Which is like
thing. Yeah,
wouldn't
like
even
everyone
need to pay like too much attention to it. Just one person getting ready in the morning and then that's it.
yeah,
Um,
it'd be great.
yeah. And so Lila's lashing out and screaming, and then Jen immediately is doing what Tula's saying, grab her feet and helping tie her down to the chair. And so what Tula's explaining is that this is one of Lila's foremothers
Mhm.
who's come to their surface, and Jen, because she's so close to Lila, needs to help bring her back to herself.
And she hasn't been having the dreams, so she's not affected by whatever it is, which could mean that she has an immunity which they could
Immunity,
use, which would be
which was
cool.
very important. Yeah.
So she talks with
And
her and she, like, calms her down.
and it's
And I
very
wanna
sweet.
it is very sweet. I wanna point out that oftentimes when you have a hero wandering in the underworld, love is the thing that brings them sort of
Mhm.
direction.
And I think that this is like a very good way of reiterating that Jen genuinely loves Lila as a little sister, not just another sister of the Sisterhood, which kind of goes back to what she was saying to Lila before she underwent the agony, which is they only care about the Sisterhood, not about sisters. But that's what Jen cares about, is her friends. And so it was just a very well done scene, and it's a very softer side of Jen than we typically see from her, which was like a nice character moment for both of them. Anyway, so also to mention, like, Tula's leaving Jen here by herself.
Yeah.
Sedative, just in case, because Tula's got stuff she needs to do. But then after this, we cut to this painting, and it's of Haviko and Natalia's wedding. Same red dress, same bald head. You could tell it's them. And then who is looking at it other than Francesca? And she has this very stunning shot of her arms crossed. And oh, she's amazing. I'm obsessed. And then Constantine shows up, and they have this hug that's genuine but also awkward.
Yeah.
Like her genuinely, oh, my son. And then him like, hi, Mom. Haven't seen you in a really long time.
It's been a while.
And then they get talking, and they find out that Constantine didn't send a message. And Constantine was like, oh, I thought you were coming because of Kasha. And then Francesca finding out that Kasha passed away. And then Constantine mentioning that Valya came to personally deliver the message. And
So Francesca's shit. I gotta go talk to Valya.
yeah, some stuff. I leave, and everything goes to shit.
My bestie guys, what is happening?
And so then we cut to Harrow, and he's arriving in Desmond's office to ask for forgiveness for challenging the Emperor. And Desmond's like, your apologies owed to the Emperor, not me. But Harrow's wanting or hoping for a way to absolve himself of his sins. And so Desmond wants to know about Valya's involvement in this rebellion, and Harrow says that he doesn't know anything, but then Desmond says that Harrow thinks that they're involved in the spice trade. And then Harrow, there is something, and actually, okay, just to say something, like, for whatever reason, I was thinking that this was going to be Theodosia disguised as Harrow for some reason.
Oh.
She's acting all weird at times. And then it made sense later, but I was just like, Harrow, there's something wrong with you.
He's awkward.
He is. But anyway, so
Good.
then he starts giving this like spiel about how pirates have been hijacking his whale fur shipments, and Desmond doesn't seem to care at all about whatever this is. And he's okay, get to the point. What does this mean? And then eventually he realizes that if there's anything going on with the spice that the sisters must be involved in, then it would be them going to the underground markets.
And he's the underground. It's like he actually needs this, yeah. Like, it was an interesting scene. It also shows to me, like, I don't know, Desmond doesn't have a lot of investigative. He mainly relies on torturing people for answers.
He's quite a lot of brawn and maybe not so much brain.
Yeah. I wouldn't even classify him as a himbo. He's not happy-go-lucky enough.
No, he's not.
Nope.
But so then Desmond eventually says that he gives Harrow this thing. It's like a little ball marble sort of thing. And he's get me proofs of your aunt's involvement. And that's what's going to absolve Harrow. And I guess this device is supposed to record or be able to obtain whatever proof, I assume. But then we cut from there, and Francesca is arriving to talk with Valya, and she's wanting to know why I should tell her the truth. And we learn that this is because Francesca's been working with the Spacing Guild, and I guess they monitor dispatches, so Valya wanted to be careful and not put her mission in jeopardy. And then Valya says that Constantine should be the leader of the new fleet.
Yeah.
And then also that Francesca needs to try and get Haviko to come back to their side and recognize the value that the sisterhood has. And she's okay, but like, how am I supposed to do that with his new Bashar in the way? And then vows, it's okay, I got that covered.
Yeah. Yeah. This is where I think Valya is, I'm the ruler of the sisterhood. Don't worry. I got this all covered. It is very clear that she is fully in her king archetype phase, right?
Yeah.
Because people show up when she wants them to show up, and they leave when the only thing she can't seem to trick is Desmond, right? She can't seem to get rid of him, and there's a reason for that, which we'll get to now at the end, obviously. But when the king stays longer than is necessary. So I don't think we're there yet, but I do think we will get there with this leads to stagnation, the sick king motif. We see it with Havoco. He is a sick king, and that triggers the cataclysm, right? So even though the sisterhood is experiencing a future cataclysm, um, it's not actually there yet. This is all so far away in the future that they're worried about, right?
Yeah. And so that's why I'm actually curious where this is going to wrap up in a way, because if it is talking about Paul, then that is such a far point in the future that they need to feel like there's some resolution to their problem now so that they can move on to the. And so I don't know how that's going to resolve itself, or how they're.
Or they could end on a negative note where they're the underdogs, right?
That's true. I guess we'll have to see how this finale shakes out, because so much needs to happen. I have no idea how long it's going to be. It's going to be crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Desmond gets his guys together and they go looking for insurgents. And there's like great subversive moment where you think he might be coming to arrest Kieran, but he's actually asking him if he wants to join. Gonna go smuggler hunting. Want to be buddy cop?
Oh my God, Desmond is such a cop. I even wrote in my notes when he goes and like fight. I'm like, what a cop. But then he's like Constantine shows up and he's, oh, I won't keep you from your dance lesson. It's so funny. Just absolute shade. Yeah, you could be actually doing something important like me. But no, you're doing dance lessons with the princely boy.
And then once Desmond's left, Kieran is reprimanding Constantine for being late, basically calls him lazy and irresponsible, and then says he's not going to teach him if he's not going to take it seriously, and that's his lesson. And then Kieran takes this opportunity to leave, which is why I'm like not sure if he actually meant any of it, but he was just like needing a reason to leave. Like maybe he like meant it, but not meant it that harshly.
I don't think he would have been that harsh if he wasn't in a rush to go and save Michaela.
Yeah, like he was very much like a reason to get out of there. So then, yeah, he goes to warn Michaela, who already has like a bit of a plan and already knows what's going on. But Desmond's going through all of these people in the underground markets, and eventually an informant or a dealer is gonna lead back to her and division. So they have to think of something quickly. So basically, the two of them start setting up these charges. But then we cut again to Jen talking to Lila, and eventually it shifts into Raquel.
Yeah. Possession is super interesting. Marie Louise von Franz, who of course is a young psychologist, a student of, talks about symbolism in fairy tale and myth and folklore. And she talks about how possession is like possessing or having multiple archetypes in you at the same time. And I love it so much because it's like, oh, you have a mage in you. You have this idea of this mage, this very wise mage. And so the mages that we're most commonly familiar with are Force ghosts in Star Wars, or like Gandalf the White, who comes back to try and give key knowledge to save civilization and the world as we know it. And guess what Mother Raquel does?
Exactly that. Oh, it's so good. And I just want to give props to the actress because she's phenomenal in this episode.
Yeah.
The way that she plays for Kella is so good. And so then Jen takes her to see Tula, even though Tula was like, keep this a secret, keep her there. And then she realizes that it's Raquel. And basically they start doing these experiments on this piece of Kasha's brain. And you can see it, and it's got this like weird spindly black stuff on it. And Raquel says that she's familiar with this damage from the wars. And so they have to run some samples and stuff. And then Raquel also learns from Tula about some of Valya's progress, and that she and Dorothea never mended things. And there's this,
but was happy with how Valya had acted because she kept the sisterhood good, the
Mhm.
building standing, things are good. Like she kept the great work in place, which was the main thing. But she understands that sh some fences couldn't be mended.
Mhm. She's like, your sister's will. It doesn't seem like she's upset necessarily at Valya for it, but she's like, it would have been ideal if they could have fixed stuff, but
Yeah.
probably that wouldn't have happened.
I
And
knew Valya would probably win. It's
yeah. And they're also like doing a lot of like silent revealing of information because Jen's there. But it was just like a very well acted scene. It was really good. But then we cut back to the Harkonnen apartments, and basically we find out that the plan for Harrow to go see Desmond was Valya's plan, and that basically she wants him to endear himself to Desmond, and him asking forgiveness and stuff is going to help continue to bolster House Harkonnen and stuff like that. But it's a little unclear if Harrow actually intends to betray Valya in some way, because he does.
he said that, yeah, he's indicated that he was interested in having her in trouble.
Because he specifically says he wanted me to tell him or what you're up to, and then he actually
Mhm.
asked her, "What are you up to?" And so like there's this like fine line of like, why would he say that if he wanted to keep it a secret? So like I'm
Mhm.
like in this position where I don't know, because he also seemed from the beginning a lot more open to Valya coming and getting involved and wanted her influence, and so far she served him well. Uh,
Yeah, and she gives him the ring, which is, of course, like a crowning symbol, or you're now the head of the family. This is your responsibility. And if he wasn't taking into a leadership role before, he would be now. He has to go
mhm.
back to Linky Vale to go and do the funeral for his uncle, proven that he is not Tuli's kid after all of my doubts.
Yeah.
That's fine. But and he says, "Consider this your home while I'm gone." That's nice.
Mhm. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think I don't want to give him this much credit because I don't think they're very similar at all. But he almost makes me think a little bit of if Littlefinger were super incompetent or like very junior at what he
Yeah. Yeah.
because he seems like could play everyone, but he just doesn't know how to do that.
Yeah, he's still baby. Yeah. But then we have, of course, Theodosia who approaches and asks about like how this is all gonna play out because this doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. And we get the first talk about imprinting.
And Valya says that when they're a little further along in their training, they're going to learn about this and eventually be trained in it. And it's an emotional and physical bond so strong it alters the course of someone's life.
And then we flash to Francesca. So this is great. This is Show Me, Don't Tell Me. I love it
Mhm.
so much. And he's like a little teenage boy. He so he's there talking. I have a serious conversation. We need to do
And
something
he's just
sort of
like
fun.
breathing and like,
And
oh
he's
my gosh,
like,
I get to talk
"We're
to
here." She's, yeah, I'm here. And then I'm gonna kiss you. Um, it was fire. It was great. She behaved very smartly in saying, "I didn't come to drive a wedge between you and your wife." And I added in my notes, "Yet."
I
Because it's
in
a
my notes.
quid pro quo situation, sir.
Mhm. In my notes, I was like, good move.
Yeah,
It
I
was
said
so
smart move.
so smart because
So good.
it also because the other thing is that Natalia has this like very like I think Francesca, what's gonna work in her favor is just being like honestly herself and like
Mhm.
I'm here because my son. I have genuine like feelings for you and we have a history together and it means something to me too. And but I also respect the fact that you're in a marriage and all of these things. And I want to be honest. And I'm not trying to be here for sisterhood business, but I'm also a sister. We don't all suck. And
Yeah.
just like little things that like I think when Natalia I think starts to go a little bit too far,
Yeah.
that's where it's gonna really work in her favor in juxtaposition, which actually is very interesting because this
They
feels
become
very
foils. Yeah.
yes, and this feels very Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson Dune, in my opinion, just because in the Dune Schools trilogy, which is like the immediate prequel to Dune, where it's like young Leto and stuff like that, He actually has a concubine before Jessica in those books. It's like a girl that he's had a thing for since they were kids, but she's treated him like shit until her family like loses everything.
Oh man.
And then and they actually have a son together in those books, but then that
Oh.
son dies. The son dies, but then eventually like Jessica comes along and they have immediate chemistry and stuff, but they're playing it off. It's okay. She just have to be your concubine. She can just be like your secretary or something, your bodyguard. But they have like immediate chemistry. But anyways, it becomes this like juxtaposition where like this other woman is like and she's also not Bene Gesserit trained. Where like she's like very like politically going too far and like politically and then the sister swoops in and gets the upper hand.
Yeah. I think you're right about what's going to happen with this. So we flash back to Michaela in Lila's body, who's doing her experiments. I've seen this before. It's the Omnius plague, a virus.
This is from the books. It's called the Omnius scourge. And like it said, it takes root in the liver. It was a weapon used by the machines against humanity. And in the books, Raquella discovers that melange, the spice, slows down the effects of the virus and in some cases cures it. But then there was another strain after it was eradicated. There was another strain that happened on Rosak, which was the initial homeworld for the sorceresses or the sisters or whatever. And Raquella goes there to find out why the spice wasn't working and what caused the strain. And then through that process is how Raquella gets poisoned and goes through the transmutation process that awakens her ancestral memory. And then that's
cool.
what she uses to destroy the strain. And yeah, I was like, interesting. Okay.
Oh, cool.
And now this new virus that they're dealing with is very similar, but it takes root in the brain and it's the amygdala, which is the fear center, and it's airborne RNA retrovirus. That's crazy.
Genetically modified, right?
It's
So that's really interesting because like lots of people have questioned whether Desmond Hart is like a machine. I don't know that this gives us a conclusive answer.
So like my guess is that, like you said, everyone's infected with this virus, just everybody. But there's something that causes certain people to become more susceptible to. And I'm wondering if the ability that Desmond has is to essentially activate the fear center to the point where it causes the effect that the virus has. So it's
Like it
dormant and
triggers
has to
it.
be awakened. And so what I think is that he did it to Pruitt. He used his abilities on Pruitt that caused him, and that's what happened. But then what happened to Kasha was an accident, and you were completely right, because I think she activated her fear center.
Did it to herself,
When she was experiencing the vision, her fear overcame her so much that she did it to herself. But it would present with the same effects.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I love it because, it's good. But everybody has it.
You were right.
We've both been right this episode.
I just love it when we're right.
It's good for everybody when we're right.
Yeah.
We flash back to Michaela and Desmond. Kieran's hiding in the background. I wrote down F and cop.
In the scene, just because it's important, Vila has given Desmond's DNA to Tula and found out about Raquella inhabiting Lila. The DNA has gotten there.
Exactly, yeah. So we do have the DNA, which was captured last episode with him bleeding all over the face because of using his powers. And we have this moment with Michaela versus Desmond, and he's no-knock raid. And Michaela says something, God created Arrakis to train the faithful, which we've heard before. But she says, and I live here.
It's so good because, her arc in this season has been so subtle.
It's great.
So interesting because what she's saying is God created Arrakis to train the faithful is like a classic Dune line. But she's saying, I live here, which means that she's technically Fremen by birth, but she lives on Salusa. She isn't one of
I don't need training or I'm not faithful.
And she doesn't have any motive against the Imperium or allegiance to the Fremen. And she's reiterating that this is the case. And then that does come back around soon. But yeah.
But we have this
She did.
great, so Desmond starts to raid and all the troops are in the place and Kieran has this great fight to get Michaela out. It was so good.
Yeah.
And then she pulls out the knife that he is familiar from, of course, Yanez using it and being like, aha, this is a sisterhood knife. He's like, oh, it's so funny. But this sets off the chain reaction to the explosives, and Desmond manages to get his shield on at the last second. But then he finds her dress right before that, and he puts it in front of him. And I'm like, if the dress fits, it's a little weird. Like he holds it up to himself because it's just dealing with mommy issues. His shadow is his dark mother that had abandoned him. And so he's dealing with these mommy issues. So he literally puts the dress up to himself and then is exploded in this sort of death experience where, yeah, he is changed because of this information that they are everywhere, even when he doesn't expect it.
Yeah. And Kieran and Michaela get out, and he's very mad. He's questioning her loyalty to the rebellion, her loyalty with the Sisterhood, and he seems to have his own distrust within the Sisterhood. And then he's like, how can you do this to people on Arrakis? Like, where does that loyalty fit in? How can you just let your people burn and stuff like that? And it is a very big betrayal. And then he says that he never wants to see her again. And in my notes, I said, the tension was tensioning.
Yeah.
And it's just,
They
wanted.
better charisma than Yanez and him.
I was going to say that, yes. This is what I was hoping for.
Bland toast over in the palace.
Like, they started out so strong, and if they just had a little bit of this sooner.
I just don't know that they're supposed to have had any of that.
That's also true. If they're not meant to be, then that just makes sense. But yeah, Michaela and Kieran have had tension a little bit throughout the entire season, but it definitely comes to a head here. And it was very, it was so good. And I think he holds up his bloody blade at her too, which was like.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah. I loved it.
And it's such a good moment to have him call her out in that way, because I think that's two moments that are very much getting to the root of her identity and her struggle with her identity and where her allegiance really lies. Really well done and executed. And her emotional reaction afterwards was and you can see how much all of that was brewing inside of her. So yeah, it was a really good scene. And then we get a clip that reiterates Desmond survived. He wakes up in the wreckage
with the little scrap of garment. I don't know if it's from the dress or if it's his scrap of garment that he always carries around with him.
Yeah, I am curious about that. I couldn't tell. I assumed it was the one that he was holding that would have gotten burnt up. But then also, I wasn't sure if he carries his little piece of cloth with him, because he did earlier.
Baby blanket.
Yeah. Okay.
Don't feel bad for the monster.
No, enough.
You're feeling bad for the little monster.
Poor little evil man. Mommy issues.
Save you. It's fine. They make you better. Speaking of mommy issues, we have Constantine's chat about purpose with his mom. So I've always learned about my dad, but I don't, the sisterhood does everything with purpose. And she's very honest with him. You're here to protect your sister. Sorry, dude.
Yeah, it made me curious, because I was like, so what's the timeline here? Was he intentionally, because that's where I was like, is he younger than Inez? Or was the intention always for Havoko to marry somebody else politically, but then they wanted to create a sibling, probably the closest possible person to the royal heir?
I feel like he's within the same year older. So she was probably with him for a couple of years, and she only purposefully had Constantine near the end of their relationship when he was about to get married, so that there was always an older sibling to watch out for Yanez.
Yes, that makes sense.
They didn't know Yanez would be significant to them until they found her when she had been kidnapped. But they knew they needed her genetic.
Yeah, I think at the very least, they were like, genetically, we need her, so we need someone to watch out for that. Yeah. Because I think that's also why it was like, then she's going to be going with the Sisterhood. And they just keep tabs on her themselves. Whereas before, if she wasn't going to come, then they needed someone there.
Mhm.
And now that it seems like Inez might not be going to the Sisterhood, the role that Constantine was supposed to have is going to be very important. And I think that's where also some of this developed for him, where like he wasn't really needed in that way that he was initially supposed to be. And he was never given that role. He was never given any kind of expectation.
He was very directionless, right? So again, back to the first stage of your life archetypes, you're often trying to find purpose early on. Why am I here? What am I supposed to do? What do I want to be when I grow up? Is always the questions, right? But he looks around and he finds the sort of damning evidence against Kieran.
Yes. The like schematics of the palace. And the last thing that his mom said to him was that he's meant to protect his sister, the future heir of the Imperium, even from those who claim to love her.
He's also a
As
threat.
It's also a threat to her.
Yeah.
And then, but we cut to Michaela showing up to tell Valya everything that happened with Desmond, that he's alive. And we now know that Michaela's plan was the Sisterhood's plan. They all orchestrated this whole thing to try and take Desmond off the board.
Oh, you
Or at
didn't
least
even
get
have to
time.
leave the apartment.
She didn't even have to leave. Just put her feet up, relax, everything will
Sounds like a
Wait.
king to me.
definitely.
All these lieutenants and generals to do things for her.
Mhm. Yes. But then Valya gives Michaela a thing for safe passage to their safe house on Arrakis. I'm so excited for Michaela to be on Arrakis. I think that'll be very interesting. But at this point, though, she seems somewhat disillusioned by the Sisterhood. This will likely play into her reconnecting with the Fremen on Arrakis. And ultimately, like I've said before, I thought that this was the case, but I think it makes a lot of sense here. Like she's part of the Sisterhood, so I think she ultimately still aligns with some of what the Sisterhood believes in terms of the trajectory of the Imperium and the things that they need to avoid that are a threat. But at the same time, she's a Fremen, and that's like primary for her. And so
Yeah.
to protect her people is important.
I love
But I
dual
think
loyalties and stories. It's really
Yeah.
awesome.
And I think this is how there's eventually going to be that moment of the Machinara Protectiva on Arrakis and how the Bene Gesserit, it's like separate, but it's initially really influenced by the Bene Gesserit. And so we're going to see how that grows, which will be really cool. But yeah, so she calls out Theodosia being like molded in Valya's image, and she's like, I wonder how long it'll take for you to be so naive, acolyte. And then she like pieces out all cool and stuff.
I think that Theodosia has way more knowledge of Valya's motivations and things like that.
Yeah, that's true. I have a sense. Because also, I think Theodosia is one of the few people who sees Valya as a human being too,
Yes.
which I think really like she doesn't just see her as an emotionless, doesn't care about anything.
Mother Superior. The task at hand is driving everything. Yeah.
And you get a little bit about that with Jen questioning Tula about, and what have you sacrificed? And then Tula's like, you have no idea. It's just this idea that you don't assume that your elders are people too. You don't assume that your parents have lives. You assume that your teachers have lives, but they do.
Like when you see your teacher in the supermarket just buying their grapes, you're like, oh, wait, you're a human. You exist outside of the box of school? Oh, God. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so we see Kieran returning to the palace. Constantine's just waiting around in the training room. And then he's thanking him for reminding him of his purpose.
His sister is sucking up to his dad, by the way, in case you were wondering what his purpose is. But we have this beautiful moment where he calls him friend and he touches him. And it's like a Brutus moment because et tu, Brute, because Brutus like kisses Julius Caesar's cheek to betray him. Et tu, Brute.
Say a little
It's
bit.
very like Judas too. Yeah, very similar motif in our. Yeah, it was great. And then he has the troops come in and capture Kieran and take him away. And then we cut to the dinner party, which is in our whale carcass.
It's such a good scene. Yeah, so Haviko stands up till he's very happy. Like, for once, he actually looks happy, which is hilarious.
Francesca, he missed her.
And it's, he asks Constantine to stand up, and then he praises him for his quick thinking and decisive action and helping reprimand a traitor in their own house, which is Kieran, their sword's master. And then you can see Nen's reaction, which is like, huh?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
When did this happen?
And Natalia's reaction to this whole conversation when he keeps on, me and your mother. And Natalia's like second lemon.
So,
It's so good. The face that she makes is disgusted and angry and lemony and sour. Like, oh my, your mother is proud of you as I am. Like, it's
so good.
do you guys need a room? It's funny. But
Oh
he
my
makes
God.
him the commander of the fleet.
And so then, like, everyone clapping and stuff. And then Inez is observing everyone. And, like, she's observing her mother. And then she's observing, like, Haviko and Francesca and Constantine. And they seem this little bubble of happy family.
Yeah.
You could see the way that Natalia is looking at them. And then Inez is watching her mother storm off. And then we don't really know where.
I have a question for you. Do you think that Francesca has it in her mind to replace Inez with Constantine? Because she keeps on saying to Haviko how much he is like him as a younger man.
Yeah. Okay, so, but the thing is that Francesca didn't tell Constantine that. Okay, so here's my, like, weird tinfoil tiara moment. What if Francesca lied to Constantine about him being created to protect his sister? I'm almost wondering if
Mm.
they wanted a sister on the throne and they were hoping for Francesca to marry Haviko. And then they could have had a daughter, but they could have just had a son and then arrange for that son to then get with a sister, which is, like, basically what happens in Dune in the future. Is, like, that's basically the setup most of the time, is, like, the emperor marries a sister, the daughters then are trained as sisters, or if they have a son, that son is probably married to a sister, and then it just continues like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there could be, like, some semi-truth within what Francesca's saying, in the sense of, because she does specifically say future heir to the Imperium, or maybe she was speaking just specifically in what it means to be a sibling. Like, why do siblings exist is to protect.
It'll be
each other.
interesting to
But-
see. I'm not sure.
But I don't know if it's, like, necessarily that she's, like, gunning for him to take the throne right now.
No, but I think
especially
it might
because,
be in the back of her mind.
Maybe. I do think, though, that at some point Constantine's going to become emperor. I'm banking on that happening eventually.
Just be another puppet, I
would-
think.
But that's the thing, though. He probably would, but I also wonder if he wouldn't. He'd be Haviko, but better.
I think so.
In the Sisterhood's favor. He would genuinely be, like, pro Sisterhood, but he would also be, like, his own decisive man. But it would be, like, in a way that the Sisterhood agrees with.
We have 3 unions that happen and then the reveal of a final union. And this is done so well. We have Yanez and Kieran in this moment of, they're in the darkness, right? They're in this dark prison, right? And she asks him these questions. She uses her truth sense, so she's getting the truth out of him. This is an example of alchemical union, meeting your other half in the darkness, being like, okay, obviously I didn't know anything about you. You're not exactly who I thought you were, but maybe we actually are in alignment, even though I didn't know anything about you. So that's significant. He tells her the truth that he couldn't betray her. He was planning to, but couldn't, and he would still die for his beliefs. Such a good scene.
Yeah. And I love the moment where she's, do you truly believe you can create a better Imperium? Because, like, you could tell that is something that Inez cares about. Like, she wants to be a good ruler, and she wants a good legacy for the Imperium. Yeah, that was, like, a very well done scene. And so that's, like, a good. I'm hoping that this is an upward movement for them there,
Yeah.
and the possibilities with them in episode 6, but I guess we'll have to see. But after In- after Inez and Kieran,
We have the scene of
Well,
Tula like walking down
yes, she's looking
stairs, right?
down
She's a walking,
stairs.
all intercut with Tula like basically going and
Mhm.
discovering this information. But we have Natalia going to Desmond,
Mm.
and she says like these crazy things like each man must face his own conscience and make his own choice, like indicating she's making her own choice. But Shai Halud makes the final choice. And I wanted to ask you, how common is the belief that Shai Halud is God? Because it seems like everybody believes it.
It's not though.
At least
But,
she
like,
believes it.
So this is my theory.
Yeah.
At least in Dune, for the time period that we're familiar with, the Fremen beliefs are maybe known by like people who've interacted with them on Arrakis in passing, or like mentats who've done research. Like Paul listens to some film books about it, and they mention Shai Hulud. So that is a name that is known because it's heard by Fremen and people who live in the city of Erkin. But in terms of like actual belief in it, because it's just seen as like Fremen superstition, it's like a very common, like the greater Imperium views beliefs the way that a lot of Western imperial countries would perceive indigenous beliefs.
Yeah.
This sort of, it's just this.
So I'm wondering if she's
Hokey
just
pokey.
saying it.
I think she does believe, but I think it's for not because she's Fremen, but because I think she has like distant connections to the Fremen. Because
Right.
her in the scene in the first episode when she's preparing Inez for the engagement ceremony, she says that the style or whatever comes from the Wanderers of Harmonthep or
Right.
something like that. And the Fremen were originally called the Wanderers, and that's when they were like before they settled on Arrakis. They were pacifist people who wandered from planet to planet. Sometimes they were enslaved. Eventually, they escaped from slavery, and they would get peoples from all different parts that, like, and eventually it would amalgamate into what would eventually settle on Arrakis and be the Fremen. But at one point, they were called the Wanderers. So I'm wondering if maybe her people had some tangential, like really distant connections to the Fremen. And maybe that's why there's some level of knowledge of or belief that there's something to the Fremen belief that she has. Maybe one of the worlds that came to the Imperium through her was Arrakis. It probably wasn't, but I don't know. There's maybe something there. The other thing is that maybe she's just playing it up because of Desmond.
That's what I was wondering. She knows these things, but yeah, I don't know. It definitely classifies as a dark union because she is manipulating him. And so a dark union, of course, is when there is a more powerful person who is subsuming the power of a young hero or heroine for their own advantage. And she's being very tender, but it's creepy in a tyrant older woman way. Not that their age difference is that much, but she's old enough to be his much older sister,
Yeah.
especially if we know roughly his age.
Yeah, thinking that Francesca and Haviko are roughly the same age. And then he would have married Natalia roughly around in the same couple years. So she
Yeah.
would have had to have been, and then he would only just have been being born.
Yeah.
So she's at least
20
15
years?
to 20 years older than him.
Yeah. It's not
Looks
an
great,
insignificant.
but-
She looks great. Spice is a miracle. And let us get rid of the Imperium of these witches forever, which is not something he doesn't want. But he doesn't necessarily want to go about it in the way that she was proposing. And he doesn't necessarily want to work for her. He wanted to work for Haviko. So
Yeah.
this is like a co-opt. Like she is co-opting him from what he originally wanted.
And
That's
like,
why it's a
he-
dark
he-
union. It's using his power for her own advantage.
And like he kisses her, but there's nothing there for him. That you could see that there's genuine longing and stuff for her. And like on the one hand, I'm like, get yours, girl. I get it. We're beyond the point of, let the wife whose husband's getting some on the side get some on the side too. That's fine. I don't have any problem with that. But she clearly feels some connection with him. But I also feel like it's more like she's putting him on a pedestal.
I
And
think
like,
she's just
he's
using him for his power.
which is he's
Yeah.
things that Havako isn't. I can
Mhm.
use him. This is so good. It's like this not genuine
Yeah.
action, but like you can see that she wants it, but he's just like a blank board.
Yeah. And we cut to Francesca and Havako having this like very touching, like intimate moment union in the kind of, it's like the room that's like underground and womb or like cave like, but made out of wood. I don't know. It's hard to describe, but another union. Oh my gosh. And then we have Desmond's history with in blood truth, which it turns out that this is the child of Tula and Atreides guy,
Mhm.
Ori, from the flashback episode that we had about her killing all those people. And it makes sense, her reactions to some things throughout this entire season, how she's
Mhm.
reacted to certain things. And this makes me rethink about what Desmond is, because we, not once, not twice, but 3 times we have a union of these opposites in the end of this episode just to drive in the point of
Mhm.
what is going on, which is alchemical union or
Yes.
apotheosis.
Mhm. Oh my gosh. And it, just before we like really jump into the alchemical union stuff, I think it's just like important to like talk a little bit more, I think, about Desmond, like his dark mother and his projections
Mhm.
of that onto the sisterhood, because he reveals that basically, like when he's talking to Valya, or when he's talking to Natalia, that he was abandoned. His mother was a sister, and he was like discarded like trash. In Robert Bly's The Little Book of the Human Shadow,
Mhm.
he talks about projection, which is when you give away an energy or power that is a part of yourself onto someone else. And when one projects, it's, or particularly in the instance of a man, as a child, he'll begin to project his interior witch very early, perhaps at 2 or 3 months. And the mother is usually a good point for that to latch onto. And so triggers for this would probably be like initial refusal for breastfeeding or some other setback in initial upbringing. And so this perception becomes empowered by enormous rage, and there's perceptions of sayings attached to the mother's mouth. Skulls appear around her neck like Kali, and children feel grateful when a grown up reads witch stories to them, because then it proves that they're right and they're not insane to have these envisionments of this dark mother archetype. And the child, this could be male or female, lives with this secret that the mother, whom everyone declares to be supportive, caring, has a witch face at times. And the child knows he's too small to do anything about it. And that's what Desmond's experienced. Like, it would have been like right when he was born, he's just discarded like trash, that rejection early on. And then as he's growing up, you know, everyone's saying, "Oh, the sisterhood, they're so supportive. They just want to serve the Imperium. They're so good." And that's all, the perception that they have, and that's being told to him. But then eventually he starts seeing these visions, and he's seeing like the blood that trails behind the sisterhood, and he recognizes his own abandonment. And so he has this dark witch figure that he's projecting onto the sisterhood in place of his dark mother figure, and this rejection or disconnect that happened when he was very young. And so this is something that Robert Bly's talked about in the Little Book of the Human Shadow. And I know, MC, that you've read this book and you love it. You talk about it all the time.
Yeah, everyone should read it. It's not very big. It's literally little. It's like thick, like very little, but it gives you a lot of language to talk about, especially trauma, as well as things that you've dealt with in the past that you've been ignoring. Robert Bly was a poet, and so he took Jungian concepts like the shadow and breaks them down into a way that a lot of people can understand and describe. So our shadow is this trash bag filled with all of the things we don't want to look at that we carry behind us. And when we don't look at it and sort through it, it becomes smelly and gross, just like a trash bag. Another word for the shadow could be the baggage that you carry with you when you get into a relationship. And so it's a visceral way to talk about these concepts and how they will reflect. And so it makes me think about what Desmond's going to project onto Natalia in this semi relationship or this union
Mhm.
that they're in, which is interesting. Um,
Yeah, because he goes
but yeah,
like
no,
right
he
after this to
definitely
talk
has.
about Robert Bly. Right after this segment, he talks about like how eventually that witch gets projected then onto the romantic partner
Yeah.
in the marriage or whatever relationship. Yeah, like you said, it would be very interesting to see how this
Dealt with it. And so every woman appears to be your dark mother or your witch.
exactly
Yeah.
interesting. But yeah, so Desmond as this sort of alchemical child.
Yeah, so he's the divine child, which in pop culture, we've seen children before. Star Wars is like my best example of how I can talk about these, but Baby Yoda, Grogu, Anakin as a young child. So we have seen examples even in sort of modern mythopoeia of divine children that are born and they have all of this potential because of what they represent, which I'll go into in a second, but they can be manipulated and turned to darkness and basically become Darth Vader. And look at Desmond. He's basically Darth Vader, isn't he?
Yeah.
Like he is. He's covered in scars. He's got an animal skin, like we've talked about. So he's in a beast form. But divine children start out as representing healing for the larger society. They represent the birth of the elixir or the grail. The divine child themselves is the herald of the change in society and is the result of this underworld union that happens in the darkest, deepest parts of us. They are the
Mhm.
seed of transformation and new growth in the universe. And Desmond's all, we got to burn stuff to the ground so that we can have new life. And he's not wrong about it. Something does have to change. He's just going about it in the absolute wrong way because
Mhm.
he is corrupted and dark and stuck in his own underworld because he's never had a chance to grow up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's and what's really interesting about this is that essentially like the alchemical child, the divine child,
The Coniencio?
Codian
Coni-
show,
Coniencio?
it is basically the philosopher's stone in alchemy mythically
And it's also
spiritually.
represented by the Ouroboros
Yes.
or
And
the figure 8, which is on the Sisterhood ring and symbols.
yes. And there's this great quote by Dennis William Hawke where he says, "The basilisk is a symbolic mythological creature with the head of a bird and the body of a dragon. According to legend, the wingless creature was hatched from cock's egg and nursed by a serpent. Chemically, the stands for the union of Mercury, the bird, and sulfur, the dragon, in the mineral caniber. Spiritually, it symbolizes the melding of our higher and lower natures of spirit, the bird, and the soul, the dragon, to create the incarnation called the child of the philosophers, which is the same thing as the philosopher's stone, the philosopher's child, the alchemical child. So, is this, yeah,
Eh,
the serpentine.
but yeah, the serpentine child. And alchemical union is often described as a union of opposites. And so you'll have symbolically water and fire coming together, or you'll have enemies to lovers, or you'll have the king and the queen united
Mhm.
together. And so all are the prisoner and the princess.
Yeah.
We get that, right?
And we talked a bit about this in episode 3 with Tula and Ori because warring houses, they're enemies. They have this duality of the solar power, the lunar power, and these opposing forces. And then also, even with that kind of bird serpent imagery, the Atreides are associated, yes, with the bull, but their official sigil is of a hawk. So the bird element there.
Mhm.
And then the dragon would be the sandworm that Desmond faces, which kind of unlocks his power for him. But then also the Sisterhood, which Tula becomes a part of, has this the sandworm associated with their
Mhm.
iconography, their ring and stuff. And so it all comes back to this idea of Desmond unintentionally, the melding of opposites and the creation of this higher power, this
Proto.
proto-Kwisatz, this unintentional initial bit of this idea of the perfected awareness that's
Yeah.
associated with this philosopher's stone idea, which is the Kwisatz, like it's a perfected awareness. It's this ideal being, and he's accidentally kind of it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. And out of this unintended union of opposites, the Harkonnen and the Atreides, we have the divine child who is on a rampage, basically. It's so cool.
It's so cool.
Yeah, and how this relates to like the alchemical journey is this is the last step. So we're leading into this moment. And so this is symbolically in our penultimate episode showing us this is going to be the end of at least this phase of the story.
Yes. And like the other things is that when it comes to these life archetype cycles, whether it's the alchemical journey, the hero's journey, the heroine's journey, these are cyclical, right? You
They
can
go in them
complete
again.
one journey and then you start it again. And you'll
Yeah.
often see this with trilogies, like with the Star Wars trilogy, each individual one will have its
Arc and
contained arc,
yeah.
but then there's the overarching.
And
So
you can also see the journey through all of the
Mhm.
movies, etc. So you can actually yeah, it's the thing is about these things is they're meant to be you leave the known world, you go to the unknown worlds from a psychological perspective or a physical perspective. You experience transformation and a change, which is this apotheosis in the darkness that you experience, or you fight the dragon and you take in some of the darkness itself. So a union with darkness either way. And then you return with the knowledge or that you have changed. There are alternatives to that where you wander off in the desert, which will sound familiar to some Dune fans, but that's also a choice, right? To not return from your journey.
not return yet for some Dune fans. But that's the thing. So even as we come to this conclusion with these arcs and with these journeys, there's more to come. These
Yeah.
don't happen once. And even within our own lives, we'll go through this experience, but there's still more life ahead of us. So we just keep going and we learn new lessons.
You go through the life archetypes and you don't necessarily stop. Sometimes you might go into a shadow archetype for a while or be in a stable archetype for a while as a parent or a ruler, etc., or as a mentor because your life is not actually doing anything crazy. Wouldn't that be nice for a little bit to not have life be crazy? And then you're like, oh, I need to experience a change. And then you'll feel like an itch, right? So all of this is story is healing. Story is a way for us to reflect on ourselves with regards to what the story is saying to us. And it's a heightened way for us to confront what we're feeling on the inside. And so just like how Inez really wants to escape the palace, she really wants to leave on her adventure and go and have her own journey. We too might feel that itch within ourselves that something isn't quite right and we need to experience a change.
Mhm.
And that's a sign that you're about to go on a journey
Yes, indeed.
or a transformation.
And leaving off on this note, if we're just going to leave the alchemical journey there, because we haven't really made any progression since the last episode, so we'll come back to that in the finale. So instead, we do actually have a couple new questions over on Blue Sky. I'll pull those up. So this question's from Avienda69 on Blue Sky. And they ask, I get confused about the supposed Atreides. Desmond Hart is much too old to be Tula's kid. I thought Kieran might be. So just like starting off, we talked about that a little bit, but yeah, he's much older than I thought they were going to go for.
We don't know if time passed between when Tula did what she was doing and then when Raquel passed. We just know it's 30 years from when Raquel passed.
Yeah, and also people make this excuse for Obi-Wan. Maybe he just aged really
In the
bad.
desert.
In the desert and the things that he's gone.
The desert was not kind to him and he did not use sunscreen.
And to be clear, Travis Fimmel is a very attractive man and he does not look 45. But I knew he was 45. So I was assuming he wasn't like 30. Yeah,
Maybe he's playing like 35 or something like that. Maybe it's somewhere in the middle.
Playing younger.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can buy that he's just playing someone a bit younger. But yeah, and I guess I think this question's
We'll just assume he never wore sunscreen or a hat.
I think this bit's kind of connected to what they were asking. I actually thought Desmond was a Gola, and of course he couldn't be killed by fire since he is fire, so he'll have to be drowned.
So this is where they keep on pointing to the mother pool. And I'm like, what if he goes to Wallach 9 and he drowns in the mother pool?
Interesting. See, it's like,
I don't think he's dying next episode. I'm sorry to say.
no,
He's too interesting.
he's too interesting. His performance is too amazing. The writers or the producers love him, the act, and audiences clearly love him. I think he's been getting great reception. He's a character I think that they would want to keep on for a while at least. But also, I think arc-wise, it's too close for the end for him.
Yeah.
At the very least, someone needs to get pregnant with his kid first. And just to be completely honest,
Just to be clear, we need his genetics.
this is the Sisterhood. They literally sent someone to get knocked up by Fade just in case he died. Because
I rest my case.
save from anyone else. But like, Gola actually was a pretty decent guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't know if that would necessarily make sense because early Golas were basically like, they looked like the person, but there was like nothing going on in there at all. Really,
I think it makes more sense that he's a proto Kwisatz Haderach from this like divine child idea, and that being inside of the sandworm awoken. He basically experienced the agony. So maybe he has legitimately got prescience, right? He sees things and he has powers that they don't have. And so this forces them to be like, oh, we gotta get some of that in this.
Yeah, and
I think he's legitimately still the kid, like still Tula's son. I think he is, because he doesn't look special. He just looks like he has
been
experienced
through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it would be too convoluted for it to be like he's the Gola of their kid.
No, I don't think that they're gonna do. I think
No.
he's their kid. I think that he's Tula's son. I think that he is just this special, again, union of opposites. It's super duper symbolic and awesome. And I hope that we've
Yeah.
convinced you of that.
And we're definitely going to be able to have more time to talk about it next episode, I'm sure. Especially because we'll have more time with him to see him in that lens.
Full arc of what he has been in the show makes a lot more
Yeah,
sense with
exactly.
this lens. And I think people want a supernatural, like they want an explanation for why he has these powers when there is an explanation in the story, is that he's like Paul.
Yeah. And it's reiterating that from the very beginning when we present the show as 10,000 and some years before the birth of Paul Atreides.
There was another guy. We gave him the idea.
Quite literally, yeah. And then that final extra question that we got was from,
Flim Flam Jim Jam?
Flim Flam Jim Jam. Do we love or hate Desmond's hair?
Not a fan. I wanted him to be cuter. I feel like he is so rough. He's the Duck Dynasty of Paul Atreides.
Yes, fair enough in the sense of he just got off of Arrakis. His priorities are not necessarily high.
Makeover. I hope Natalia actually puts him through a makeover. No, I'm not kidding. Because that would be so funny if suddenly he starts showing up and he actually looks cuter. He's not,
okay, so like
maybe not an unattractive man. They are purposely trying to make him
this
look rough
guy.
Like a backwoodsman. Just incredibly, rough.
I don't hate the hair, but I don't love the hair either.
I could use with a makeover. We're not lying here, right?
I'm
almost fashion. She could make him go to the spa.
Needs to look good. Yeah, but I'm I'm
he just
thinking
needs a trim.
Almost something a little bit like, I don't know, maybe something Vikings-esque. Channels, some of that. Like I'm thinking like a man bun and then like shorter on the sides. I don't know.
a man bun, like cleaning it up a little bit where it's like
Mhm.
back.
And then like kind of
It also, so hair changes also indicate transformation a lot. So it would be significant if suddenly he wore his hair differently.
yeah. And I think it makes sense too, especially if he is going to be taking on an official position as the Emperor's Bashar. That eventually he's going to need to start looking a little bit more presentable.
He's literally
Something
wearing the
like that.
same clothes.
It like just, but it's
like-
the same. It's just,
But
black.
it's hair, it's just black.
He was like, "I'm gonna you're gonna force me
Welcome
to
to
get
the
into
Sisterhood
fine."
podcast, aka the Fashion Point. Desmond, you may be the cops on Solution Secundas. We're the fashion police.
We're gonna have to call him out for that. Oh my gosh, it's quite literally just the same thing, but in black.
Oh man, I just thought about his knife and how much it's like his own version of a sister knife.
Wow. Yeah, you're right.
That's awesome.
So much. I can't wait for us
We're
to get
staying to
talk
the
about
end for me to have that episode.
Special moment for anyone who's stayed this long and us just like freaking out over how cool this is. Oh my gosh. I can't. We'll have so much more to talk about all of this, I'm sure, in episode 6. So I'm very excited.
The finale, we're almost there.
That's great.
Thank you, everyone, for sticking around with us this whole time and to
We really appreciate
listening to
it.
our insights. This has been a lot of fun. We love your feedback. And yeah, we've had a lot of fun deep diving into the show. So on to the finale
of this season.
Yeah, Sisterhood above all.
We hope you've enjoyed your visit to the Sisterhood. Remember to like and subscribe so you know when the next episode drops. Stay tuned to DuneNewsNet.com and follow us at Podcast Above All on Instagram, X, and Blue Sky.